Cruelty is a luxury of the powerful. He thought his words would just bounce off her soft edges, that she would absorb his insults like she absorbed every other blow in his cold marble house. He was wrong. Some boundaries once crossed burned the entire bridge behind them. Sweat pulled at the base of Harper's spine, dampening the cheap cotton of her uniform. Carrying a thrashing 5-year-old up 3 flights of mahogany stairs was a workout she hadn't signed up for. But Finn was having another episode. His small fists battered against her shoulder, his screams echoing off the vated ceilings of the Rossi estate. Harper didn't flinch. She just tightened her grip, her wide, heavy hips absorbing the impact of his kicks as she pushed through the heavy oak door of his bedroom. "I've got you, buddy," she murmured, her voice a low, steady rumble in the dark. She was a big woman. She knew it. Society reminded her every time she tried to buy clothes, every time she sat in a waiting room chair with armrests that dug into her thighs, and every time the other staff members cast pitying glances at her lunch plate. But right now, her size was her greatest asset. She was an anchor. When Finn's world spun out of control, terrified by the shadows of his father's violent life, he needed something solid to hold on to. Harper was solid. Gently, she lowered him onto the mattress. Keeping her arms wrapped securely around his trembling frame, it took 20 minutes of rocking, her own breathing slowing to a deep, metronomic rhythm before the boy finally went limp against her chest. Downstairs, a heavy door slammed, footsteps echoed on the marble floors, sharp, measured, impatient. Victor Rossi was home. Harper carefully extracted herself from Finn's grip, tucking the duvet under his chin. Her knees popped in the quiet room as she stood. Exhaustion settled deep in her bones. Working for the head of the city's most ruthless crime syndicate wasn't just a job. It was a slow erosion of her sanity. Victor was a man carved from ice and violence. A widower who treated his home like a barracks and his son like a delicate, inconvenient piece of luggage. Leaving the nursery, Harper padded quietly down the grand staircase, heading for the kitchen. She needed a glass of water. Just one quiet moment before retreating to her small quarters in the back of the house. Fluorescent lights spilled from the kitchen archway. Harper stepped inside and froze. Victor stood by the island, pouring a generous measure of amber liquid into a crystal glass. He looked terrible. His tailored suit jacket was discarded on a stool, his white shirt unbuttoned at the collar, revealing a smattering of dark hair. A fresh bruise purpled along his jawline, and there were dark crimson stains on his knuckles. Blood? Not his. He didn't look up as she entered, but his voice cut through the silence like a scalpel. "Is he asleep?" "Yes, Mr. Rossi," Harper said softly, keeping her distance. She moved toward the sink, reaching for a clean glass. He had a rough night. The sirens down the street spooked him. He needs to stop being so fragile. Victor snapped, taking a long drink. The liquor barely made him wuzz. "He's my son. He can't jump at every noise in the dark." Harper tightened her grip on the glass. "He's 5, sir. Children get scared." Victor finally turned his gaze on her. His eyes were a pale, striking gray, and right now they were flat and dead. He scanned her up and down. Harper hated when he did that. She knew exactly what he saw. A woman in her late 20s carrying 60 extra pounds. Her hair pulled into a frizzy, haphazard bun, wearing practical orthopedic shoes. She felt the sudden agonizing urge to shrink, to suck in her stomach, but she forced herself to stand still. "Don't lecture me on my son, Harper," he sneered, setting the glass down with a sharp clack. He was in a foul mood, looking for a target to vent the adrenaline and rage of whatever brutal business he'd just concluded. Unfortunately, she was the only one in the room. "I wasn't lecturing," she replied, keeping her tone carefully neutral. "Just giving a report. You baby him." Victor stepped closer, closing the distance between them. The smell of expensive cologne, copper, and whiskey washed over her. "You smother him with all that softness. He needs comfort," Harper defended, her chin tilting up despite the intimidation radiating off him in waves. Victor let out a harsh, barking laugh. It held no humor. "Comfort? You think you're indispensable because you can rock a kid to sleep. You think because he clings to you, you matter here." Harper swallowed hard. "I never said that." "Good, because you need a reality check." Victor leaned against the counter. his eyes cruel and calculating, systematically dismantling her. You walk around this house like you're part of the family. You judge the way I parent. But let's be brutally honest, Harper. You're here because no one else would tolerate your slow pace and your constant heavy breathing on my stairs. Look at you. The word struck her like a physical blow. You're a temporary fixture, Victor continued, his voice dropping to a vicious whisper. He was bleeding out his own misery all over her, tearing her down to build himself back up. A fleshy mattress for my son to land on until he learns to stand on his own 2 feet. Don't mistake utility for affection. You think anyone is ever going to want that? He gestured vaguely toward her body, his lip curling in disgust. No one is ever going to want you, Harper. You're lucky I even let you occupy space in my home. Silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. Harper felt the heat rising in her cheeks, a flush of pure, unadulterated humiliation. She had survived a lot in her life. She had built thick skin over years of subtle rejections, sideways glances, and cruel jokes. But hearing it from him, the man she secretly, foolishly respected for his sharp mind, the man whose child she loved like her own, shattered something foundational inside her chest. He expected her to cry. She could see it in the slight tilt of his head, waiting for the tears, waiting for the apology, waiting for her to break so he could feel powerful again. Harper didn't shed a single tear. She carefully placed her empty glass on the counter. "Understood, Mr. Rossi," she said. Her voice didn't shake. It was terrifyingly calm. She turned her back on him and walked out of the kitchen. She didn't look back to see the flicker of confusion that crossed his harsh features. She just kept walking. Midnight enveloped the mansion, but Harper's small bedroom was ablaze with the harsh light of a single desk lamp. Methodically, without a trace of frantic energy, she folded her clothes. A pile of oversized sweaters, comfortable leggings, and faded denim. She didn't own much. What she did own fit perfectly into one battered canvas duffel bag. Her chest felt hollowed out, scraped clean with a melon baller. "No one is ever going to want you." The words played on a loop, syncing perfectly with the rhythm of her packing. Zip, fold, stuff. She wasn't running away in a hysterical fit of tears. That was for girls in movies. Harper was a grown woman who had just been handed her exact market value by the man who signed her paychecks. He thought her body was a joke, her presence a charitable act, and her love for his son a temporary convenience. Fine, she zipped the duffel bag closed, leaving Finn was an open wound. It physically hurt, a sharp, twisting agony behind her ribs. But Harper knew a fundamental truth about survival. If you let a man degrade you and you stay, you give him permission to do it again. Victor Rossi had crossed the line from demanding employer to abusive tyrant. She could not protect Finn if she let herself be destroyed in the process. Grabbing a piece of plain white stationery from the desk, she uncapped a pen. She didn't write a manifesto. She didn't demand an apology. "I quit. My final check can be mailed to the agency." Harper, she left the note on the center of her neatly made bed alongside the heavy brass key to the estate. Hoisting the strap of the duffel over her shoulder, she stepped out into the hallway. The house was dead silent. She crept past the nursery, stopping for just a fraction of a second. She placed a hand flat against the heavy wood of Finn's door. "I'm sorry, sweet boy," she thought, squeezing her eyes shut. "I love you." Then she walked away out the back servant's entrance, past the sleeping security guard in the gatehouse, and into the cool, unforgiving night. Morning broke over the Rossi estate with the subtlety of a car crash. Victor woke up with a pounding headache and a stale taste in his mouth. He dragged himself out of bed. The memories of last night hazy but aggressively unpleasant. He remembered the blood on his hands. He remembered the whiskey. He remembered Harper. A twinge of guilt flared in his gut, sharp and annoying. He had been unnecessarily cruel. He knew that he had taken the violence of the streets and aimed it at the softest thing in his house. But she would get over it. She always did. He would offer her a bonus in her next paycheck. Maybe nod at her respectfully in the hallway. That would be enough. Where else was she going to go? Showering quickly, he strapped on his shoulder holster, pulled a crisp suit jacket over his shoulders, and headed downstairs. Usually by 7 to 8 a.m., the house smelled of bacon, strong coffee, and the faint scent of vanilla that always seemed to follow Harper around. Today, the air was sterile. Victor frowned, stepping into the dining room. The long table was empty. No breakfast. A sudden, ear-piercing shriek shattered the morning quiet. Victor flinched, instinctively reaching for his weapon before realizing the sound was coming from the second floor. It was Finn taking the stairs 2 at a time. Victor burst into the nursery. Helen, the elderly housekeeper, was standing in the center of the room looking utterly terrified. Finn was on the floor, his face red and straw with tears, thrashing violently against the rug. He was having a full-blown meltdown, the kind he hadn't had in months. "Where is she?" Finn screamed, his voice. "I want Harper! I want Harper!" Victor stared at the scene, irritation spiking. "Helen, what is going on? Where is the nanny?" The older woman wrung her hands, her face pale. "I don't know, Mr. Rossi. I came up to help get him dressed, and she wasn't here. I checked her room." Helen swallowed hard, gesturing weakly down the hall. "She's gone, sir? Gone?" Victor barked, the word sounding foreign on his tongue. "What do you mean, gone? She's probably doing laundry." "No, sir." Helen shook her head, her eyes wide with nervous fear. "Her clothes are gone. Her toothbrush is gone. She left her key on the bed." Victor froze. The annoyance in his chest vanished, replaced instantly by a cold, heavy drop of pure shock. Gone, he turned on his heel, striding down the hallway toward the staff quarters. He shoved the door to Harper's room open. It was immaculate. The bed was made with military precision. The closet door stood slightly ajar, revealing empty hangers. The small desk was bare, save for the brass key and a single piece of white paper. Victor walked over, picking up the note. "I quit. My final check can be mailed to the agency." Harper, he read the 2 sentences 3 times. He stared at her neat, pragmatic handwriting. There was no anger in the ink, no tear stains on the paper, just a cold, factual severing of ties. Down the hall, Finn's screams escalated into ragged, hyperventilating sobs. Victor stood in the empty room, the silence pressing against his eardrums. He looked at the empty face where she used to be. He had told her no one would ever want her. He had told her she was a temporary fixture. He had mocked her weight, her presence, her entire existence in his world. He expected her to cower. He expected her to stay and take it, grateful for the crumbs he threw her. He never expected her to realize she was worth more than him. Crushing the note in his fist, Victor looked toward the door. The house suddenly felt massive, hollow. He had built an empire on fear and control, manipulating ruthless men and dominating an entire city. Yet, standing in the sparse, abandoned bedroom of the fat nanny he had callously chased away, Victor Rossi realized something terrifying. He had no idea how to fix this. Chaos reigned in the Rossi household for 3 agonizing weeks. Finn stopped crying on day 4. The violent tantrums morphed into a frightening catatonic silence. He sat in the center of his expansive playroom, systematically lining up wooden blocks by color. Red, blue, yellow, over and over. If anyone stepped too close, if a shadow fell across his meticulous rows, he shrieked until his lips turned blue and his nose bled. Victor hired the absolute best. He threw money at the problem, treating his son's grief like a supply chain issue. He brought in women with sterling resumes, nannies who spoke fluent French and held master's degrees in early childhood development. Women who looked like the pristine models on the billboards he drove past every morning. Slender, immaculate, wrapped in expensive cashmere. Finn broke every single one of them. Clara lasted exactly a week. Sarah lasted 3 days before fleeing in tears. Madison quit in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon shift after Finn stared blankly at her, refused to eat, and then systematically dumped a bowl of hot soup onto her designer shoes. Victor's iron grip on his criminal empire began to slip. You cannot ruthlessly govern the underworld on 2 hours of sleep, a diet of black coffee, and a constant gnawing anxiety. During a high-stakes sit-down with the Calabrese crew in a damp, rusted warehouse by the docks, Victor nearly shot a man over a delayed shipment. Carmine, his most trusted lieutenant, had to physically step between them. "Boss, you're not seeing straight," Carmine had muttered later, casting worried glances at Victor's bloodshot eyes and the gray pallor of his skin. "Go home. We'll handle this." But home was a graveyard. Late one night, long after the latest temporary nanny had locked herself in her room, Victor walked the halls of his silent mansion. He pushed open the door to Finn's nursery. The boy was asleep, curled tightly into a rigid ball at the very edge of the mattress, his small hands clutching the air. Victor backed out, his chest tight. He walked down the corridor and stopped in front of the small room at the back of the house. Harper's room. He stepped inside. The air was stale. The faint, comforting scent of vanilla and warm laundry was completely gone, replaced by the sharp chemical bite of lemon polish. Helen had scrubbed the room top to bottom. Victor sat heavily on the edge of the bare mattress. The springs creaked under his weight. He looked at the empty desk. He remembered the heavy, deliberate way Harper used to move through his house. Unhurried, grounded, he had called her slow. He had looked at her wide hips, her thick arms, and he had weaponized them against her. He had called her a fleshy mattress. He had reduced a woman of immense warmth and fierce. Quiet loyalty to a punchline about her size. The sheer ugly cruelty of his own words echoed in the empty room. It made his stomach violently churn. He had convinced himself she was weak because she was soft. He had confused her gentle nature with fragility. But she hadn't cried when he gutted her. She hadn't begged to stay. She had simply assessed his worth, found it lacking, and walked out the door. That required a spine of absolute steel. She wasn't a temporary fixture. She had been the load-bearing wall of his son's sanity, and Victor had taken a sledgehammer to her just to make himself feel tall. He pulled out his phone. The screen cast a harsh blue light across his exhausted face. He dialed his lead fixer. "Wake up," Victor rasped, his voice rough as gravel. "I need you to find someone, Harper, the nanny. Pull her tax records, track her phone, canvass the city, whatever it takes. Find where she went." Rain battered the asphalt outside a small, independent bakery tucked into a quiet working-class neighborhood on the South End. 3 days of relentless tracking had led him here. Victor sat in his armored SUV, the engine idling, watching through the tinted glass. Inside the warmly lit shop, Harper was wiping down the pastry display case. She wore a flour-dusted canvas apron over a black t-shirt and wide-leg linen pants. She looked exactly the same, thick, strong arms, a soft, rounded face. Her frizzy hair was tied up in a chaotic knot secured with a plastic claw clip. Yet she looked entirely different. The heavy, suffocating tension that used to tightly coil around her shoulders in his house was completely gone. As she handed a paper bag to a customer, she laughed. It was a genuine chest sound that rumbled through her. Victor realized with a sharp pang in his ribs that he had never actually heard her laugh before. He had never allowed her the space to be human. Taking a deep breath, Victor killed the engine. He stepped out into the rain, leaving his security detail in the trailing car. He didn't want muscle today, he didn't want intimidation. The bell above the bakery door jingled cheerfully as he pushed it open. The smell of yeast, burnt sugar, and strong coffee hit him instantly. Harper looked up from the register. The smile died on her face. Her warm brown eyes went completely flat, the light in them extinguishing like a blown candle. She didn't drop the damp cloth in her hand. She didn't tremble. She just stared at the most dangerous man in the city standing next to a display of blueberry scone. "Mr. Rossi," she said. Her voice was perfectly level. Not a single tremor. "Ha," Victor replied. He stood awkwardly in his $3,000 suit, suddenly painfully aware of how out of place he was. "Can we talk? I'm working." She turned her back on him, walking over to the industrial espresso machine. She began knocking coffee grounds into a metal bin. "Bang, bang, bang, I'll wait," Victor said. And he did. For 45 minutes, Victor Rossi. A man who commanded hundreds and dictated the illicit flow of money through the entire eastern seaboard, sat on a rickety wooden stool in the corner of a bakery. He watched her work. He watched the sturdy, capable way she moved, carrying heavy trays of bread with ease, her thick thighs bracing her weight as she bent to clean the lower ovens. There was nothing slow or useless about her body. It was a body built for work, for endurance, for providing care. Finally, she flipped the open sign on the door to closed and locked the deadbolt. She poured 2 cups of drip coffee, walked over and set one in front of him. She sat down opposite him, keeping a solid 2 feet of distance between them. "You don't get to come here," Harper said quietly. There was no venom, just a concrete boundary. "I know." Victor wrapped his scarred hands around the paper cup. He couldn't look her in the eye. Finn is. He's not doing well, Harper. He stopped speaking. He barely eats. Harper's jaw clenched. A flicker of profound pain crossed her features. She looked away, staring out the rain-streaked window. I miss him every day. It feels like I left a piece of my own heart in that nursery. She turned her gaze back to Victor, and it was hardening into granite. But I will not let you use my love for your son as a leash to drag me back into a cage. Victor flinched. It wasn't a cage, it was a slaughterhouse. Harper corrected him smoothly. You came home bleeding and you needed someone else to bleed too. You looked at me. You looked at a fat woman who quietly did her job. And you figured I was an easy target. You figured I had no self-worth. She leaned forward, her chest rising and falling steadily. You told me no one would ever want me. So, I went where I was wanted. My boss here treats me like a human being. The customers smile at me. I have peace, Miss Rossi, and you don't have enough money in your vaults to buy my peace. Silence settled heavily over the small table. The hum of the commercial refrigerators was the only sound. Victor looked at her. Really looked at her. He stripped away his pride, his ego, and the violent armor he wore every day. I lied, Victor said, his voice cracking on the syllable. Harper frowned, confused. I lied to you in that kitchen, Victor continued, forcing himself to hold her gaze. I told you no one would ever want to. I said you were a temporary fixture. It was a lie. I said it because I was drowning, and I resented the fact that you were so grounded. You were this immovable, comforting force in a house that I have filled with terror. Finn didn't just want you. He needed you. And Victor swallowed the lump of ash in his throat. I need you. Harper remained completely still. She didn't gasp. She didn't blush. She analyzed his face with the clinical detachment of a bomb squad technician. I am a cruel, arrogant man, Victor whispered, leaning across the table. I attacked your body because I couldn't comprehend your strength. I was wrong, Harper. I was entirely, fundamentally wrong. I am begging you. Not as an employer, not as a boss, as a father who is watching his son fade away. Please come back. Harper slowly traced the rim of her coffee cup with her thumb. I am not moving back into that small room in the back of your house, she said finally. Victor nodded instantly. You can have the guest suite in the east wing, private bathroom, full autonomy. I am not a servant, Harper stated, her voice gaining traction. I am an equal partner in Finn's care. If you undermine me, if you snap at me, if you ever speak to me about my body or my worth again, I will walk out and you will never find me a second time. Understood, and you have to go to therapy. Victor blinked, completely caught off guard. What therapy? Harper repeated firmly. You are bleeding your trauma all over that house. You took it out on me. And you take it out on Finn by expecting him to be a soldier instead of a 5-year-old. I will not raise a child in a war zone. You get a therapist. You do the work, or my bags stay unpacked. Victor stared at the sturdy, magnificent woman sitting across from him. She was demanding terms from a Mafia boss. She was holding all the cards, entirely unbothered by his reputation, secured only by the absolute certainty of her own worth. A tiny, unfamiliar ghost of a smile tugged at the corner of Victor's mouth. Deal, he said softly. Harper studied him for a long moment. Then she pushed her chair back, the legs scraping against the linoleum floor. She untied her apron, folding it neatly. All right, mister, for Rossi, she said, her tone shifting back to that steady, comforting rumble that had anchored his son in the dark. Let's go get our boy. Victor stood as he followed her broad, solid back out into the rain for the first time in weeks. He finally felt like he could breathe. If Harper's journey of standing her ground and demanding the respect she truly deserves resonated with you, let us know. We believe everyone's worth is far deeper than surface-level judgments, and walking away from toxicity is sometimes the bravest thing you can do. Hit the like button if you support Harper. Share this story with someone who needs a reminder of their own power. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more deep emotional audio dramas.